that ultimately made me realize, I need to find a plan B. I don't know if anyone has ever, feared for your job security, or if you looked at it and said, man, at any moment I could lose my job. But in that moment, I needed a plan B. So for my criteria, the first thing was I needed income. I needed to have an investment that could replace my income, or at least have some income, so that if I were to lose my job, I had another resource available.
Well, welcome back to another episode of Lessons into Blessings podcast. I'm your host, Tari Thomas. We have with us on the show, hailing all the way from Ohio, John Casmon. He is a real estate entrepreneur, co-creator of the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit. He is the host also of Multifamily Insights and has helped many individuals on the business professional side to get into multifamily real estate. He's also partnered with a lot of these professionals to take down over $100 million in worth of multifamily apartments. Please welcome on the show, John Casmon.
Tari, thank you for having me. Great to be here today.
Yes, man. Thanks for joining me on the show. How's the weather out in Ohio? Because I know it gets super cold out there. I went to Michigan. I don't know if you knew that.
It's springtime as we're recording this right now, and what happens is it depends on the day and the time of the day. I mean, it's everything from 30s to 70s in the same day. You might get rain, snow, sunshine. So it's a little chaotic right now, but we love it. So it's all good.
Right. Well, I'm glad you're holding it down, because I had to leave to come to the great sunny state of Arizona. So
you know what's wild is I've my wife gets on me too, because I like the sun, but I don't like it like that. I can't do like 95 and straight heat, straight sun, man. It irritates me. So I'm okay with the couple layers.
I think then you're in a good place. And Ohio is not as cold as Michigan, not as cold as Illinois. So, you're buffered a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny too, because I'm in Cincinnati, and I'm born and raised in Cleveland, lived in Detroit, lived in Chicago. So those cold winters right off the lake, I'm very familiar with it. And people would always talk about the Lake Erie effect. Yes. And I always lived off Lake Erie or near Lake Erie. So it's just what I was familiar with. Then I moved to Cincinnati, and I'm like, oh man, this is almost balmy. This is like 40 degrees in the winter.
Hard out here.
Man, what? Like the snow melts by itself. I don't have to shovel it. This is incredible.
Right. That's funny, man. Well, I can tell you one thing that I've been loving about the Midwest lately is when you Google any reports or, hey, top places to invest, the Midwest is coming up more and more. I'd say over the past maybe 3 to 5 years or so. You're like, don't let them know. And it's the city you live in, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus, Ohio comes up a lot. You got Indianapolis coming up a lot. You've got Missouri coming up. What do you think is driving, why the Midwest is now starting to bubble up? It used to be the Sun Belt, and there was so much energy towards the Sun Belt. Now you see, the Midwest kind of coming up on charts. Why do you think that activity is happening now?
Well, I love to see it. I kind of jokingly put up the hush fingertip, but the reality is I've always been a fan of the Midwest. I'm a Midwest kid, born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. Mentioned live here in Cincy, Detroit, Chicago. So I've loved the Midwest my entire life. And the thing about the Midwest is it's very stable and it's very predictable. And some people don't like that. But with real estate investing, it's actually really important to be able to identify what's going to happen in the near future. As you mentioned, the Sun Belt has been the darling of the real estate investing era, for the last 5-7 years. And we're starting to see that pivot happen where now the Midwest is really taking on those top spots as far as best places to invest. And it really comes back to that stability. When you think about the Cleveland, Columbus, Indianapolis, Louisville, Cincinnati, these markets are pretty stable. And we don't move as quickly as some of those Sun Belt markets, but we also don't have the downsides in those markets as well. Yeah. So I like to think of it as little blips on the radar, up, little blips down, but typically nothing that drastic. Whereas in some markets, you see wild swings where there's lots of development, lots of interest, lots of investment that take place, and that makes the market hot. But then if that changes, that market can cool off and see drastic wild swings in that environment. So that's one of the reasons we love the Midwest.
That's good stuff. And I know now just with, the cooling off that happened after the COVID period, slightly after the COVID in the last year or so, a lot of people are turning to more stable markets that didn't get, they didn't get hit with a little bit of that depreciation because the market was so hot. You've got steady markets like the Midwest, which is starting to pique my interest. It kind of was piquing my interest a few years ago, but it's also just great cash flow. And I feel I kind of compare it to the South a little bit, just because it's they're not going to appreciate a ton, and as fast as Sunbelt markets, but you can get some steady cash flow.
No, that's a great way to think of it.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that's a great way to think of it, because that stability in the market comes from a couple of things, right? So I used to work at GM in Detroit, and we obviously had a lot of plants throughout the country, but particularly throughout the Midwest. And one of the things that we noticed, at least in Detroit, was we were so heavily relied upon the automotive industry that it became a challenge. And in fact, when the last economic downturn took place and I was working at GM, I saw a lot of my peers get let go. So when you see that happen and you're experiencing it firsthand, you start to realize that there's something to the construct of a city, to an economy, and how all of these things come into play. So once I started to become a real estate investor, I started to learn about markets and market dynamics and understand, well, what should I be paying attention to? And one of those key factors is the employers, who's there, what industries are there, and we're looking for industry diversification. So that was something that was really important to me, is to understand kind of the construct of these different markets, of these different neighborhoods. And that can give you some insight as far as what opportunities to look out for.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I was out kind of a little bit of segue into my next question, is just giving a little insight to our listeners on just how do they determine what's a good market or what's a good submarket. And I like that you're bringing up submarkets, because sometimes we can get so focused on like the major markets, the Dallas, the Phoenix, the Miami, and miss out on some of the gems that are, 30 minutes, an hour outside, hour and a half outside of these cities that are still, potentially great markets. So can you just describe maybe some good things, top 3 things that they should be looking out for when considering or trying to find a new market to invest in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the very first thing is it's important to understand what your investing objective is. Okay. So what's a great market for me may not be a great market for you based on your business plan and based on your investing objective. So to better answer that question, I need to rewind the clock back, right? So I am in Detroit. I am watching my boss's boss on cable news talk about the state of the business and essentially saying, right now we're on pace to go bankrupt. And I'm sitting there like, what? You just told me 3 hours ago to keep my head down and don't worry about it. And now here I am trying to update my resume, trying to figure out, where this life jacket is going to come from.
Right.
So that ultimately made me realize, I need to find a plan B. I don't know if anyone has ever, feared for your job security, or if you looked at it and said, man, at any moment I could lose my job. But in that moment, I needed a plan B. So for my criteria, the first thing was I needed income. I needed to have an investment that could replace my income, or at least have some income, so that if I were to lose my job, I had another resource available. So that was kind of the thing that framed my investing thesis. It wasn't, hey, let's try to double our money, or let's invest in these, these moonshot type deals. It was, hey, how do I get some additional passive income coming through this in our house? So if I do lose my job, I'm not solely, out there and struggling. Yeah. So when I have that allowed me to start looking at more cash flow based markets. I was in the Midwest, so the Midwest made sense. So now I'm looking at industry diversification. I'm looking at good cash flow markets. And then I'm starting to look into the sub markets, and I'm paying attention to where the energy is flowing. Where is the path of progress? Where are other people developing?
That's
and
good.
That kind of gave me a short list of neighborhoods to pay attention to, and allowed me to start making my first investments. My very first investment was actually a really good example. I looked at the city of Chicago. So Chicago has,
Chicago.
88 distinct neighborhoods or something like that.
Yeah.
And out of all of them, only one didn't lose any value during the last economic downturn. And this is just, residential housing values.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it still was eye-opening to say, wow, out of all these neighborhoods, only one didn't fluctuate and lose value in 2009, 2010. I don't know what's going on in that neighborhood, but clearly it's something that's allowing it to be stable. So I literally locked in and said, I'm only going to buy in this neighborhood. That was my whole criteria. If it was in this neighborhood, we would buy. And I ended up buying a 2-unit building. So again, this was small when I first started, but that 2-unit allowed me to grow and then develop and build on that thesis, right? So now I'm like, okay, well, why did this work? Why did this neighborhood not lose any value? Where can I replicate this? Because clearly there were other neighborhoods out of those 80 some neighborhoods that would have been good investment opportunities. But there wasn't going to be a neon sign telling me this one, right? So I had to get better at understanding how to read data and predicting kind of future outcomes. So that allowed me to get better, to figure out where could I take this, replicate it. And then not only was I doing it in Chicago, but at a certain point, it got hard to do in Chicago. And I had to now look in other markets. And that took me to Ohio for investing. So taking all those skills and learning how to do that certainly allowed me to grow. But to go back to your question, one, start with your own investing thesis. Okay. What are you looking for? If you're looking for cash flow, focus on markets that still have cash flow. Here's a caveat to that. A lot of people go for cash flow and then they only focus on cash returns. That is a huge mistake. Okay. Because paper cash flow is not real cash flow. What I mean by that is you still have to execute. So just because there's a single family house in Memphis that's going to give you a 14% annualized cash return, you have to remember that you still got to have the property management team in place. You still got to execute. You may have turnover. You may have other issues. And if some things pop up, you may not get that 14% cash return. Yeah. So make sure you're actually focusing on the risk adjusted returns and not just the paper returns as well.
That's good. No, it's definitely important. The nuance is in the details. And so being able to really, I like that you're going and you're doing your research, understanding the market. I think a lot of people will hear about a market, and say, oh yeah, I love Ohio. I hear Ohio's doing great things. And they'll never do their research and they'll never understand that there's this little town in XYZ place. And this one is really where, so you can have a whole market, right? So I think about Phoenix, the metropolitan area. We've got many sub cities that are within 30 to 45 minutes outside of the Phoenix market. Which market is doing better than others, and really understanding those details, what's driving, greater growth in this submarket versus that submarket. So I think that's really great. And then also understanding the nuances, because, it outside the market, now you're looking at the property to say, okay, where can this go wrong and how can I plan for the risk, right? So that I can manage that cash flow that's coming in, right? So that I can manage the business plan, essentially, right?
That's exactly it. And I think the key here is that you just have to understand this is still, people. It's great to look at numbers and spreadsheets and articles that say this is the best place to invest. But at the end of the day, you're dealing with people. You're dealing with residents. You're dealing with property managers. You're dealing with contractors. You're dealing with investors. So you have to have the right team and the right people in place. And I tell people there's two ways to approach this. One is you take the lead. There's nothing wrong with that. Take the lead. You've got to figure out the best places to invest. Take a look at the research. Figure out what are the important things to pay attention to and what kind of things can you ignore. And then make your investing decisions accordingly. Or you can find someone else who has some skin in the game, that understands the market landscape, that has the relationships, and then you can kind of tie to them, and you can invest either passively or through some sort of joint venture agreement where now you're really relying on their expertise of the market as opposed to trying to go out there all by yourself. But either way, figure out which path is best for you. If you've got the time and energy and you really want to be in control, by all means, go ahead and learn as much as you can and run that deal. But for a lot of people and for most investors, especially those starting out, it does make sense to partner and maybe do a JV deal or a partnership where you're more of a passive investor as opposed to taking on all that responsibility for yourself.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I did a lot myself for many, 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 many years. I think I just have a strong back or something. But, so I learned, just going in and partnering late in the game and really stumbling on syndication. As you got started, and you can talk a little bit about what was your why and going full in. How did you kind of leverage other people when you first started to really, because eventually your money runs out, right? Like you're doing stuff and, I got to wait another 5 years before I can save up enough to get the next house or to get the next. What was your way of scaling? Because, you realize, okay, it's bigger than me, right?
Well, I think most of us aren't really taught how to invest in real estate, right? There's not like a real estate investor's degree, right? You can go out there and get a license to be an agent or something like that. But most of us kind of flop our way around becoming real estate investors, reading a book here, podcast there, going to an event there. And for me, I was always under the impression that you had to do it by yourself. I don't know what it is about Americans, right? But we do our own homework. There's no group projects, right? Like we got to lock in, I've got to do it. Even when you talk to people, they ask, well, how many units do you have? And it's like, well, why are you thinking about it that way? Like, really, it comes down to, what am I trying to achieve? Yeah. And then what's the best path to achieve it? This isn't school. We don't have to do it all by ourselves. And I was saving my money. Me and my wife, we'd save our money, we'd buy a property, save our money, buy a property, save our money, buy another property. And you're right, we started running out of our own money. And I go back to where I began because the reason I got into real estate investing was to supplement my income in case of job loss. Well, 2016 came, and I'm now working at an advertising agency. And one day I get a phone call from our New York office. I got a friend in New York, and they're like, hey, they're in here. The bank's in here just repossessing stuff. I'm like, what? That sounds crazy. And I'm like, let me call the CEO. Hey, man, I just got this crazy call. And he's like, what? Let me call you back. And he does not call me back right away. So I call him back in about 15 minutes, and he gives me some, round and round answer. And the short story is, we ended up going through bankruptcy. This company had some financial issues that were unbeknownst to me. Even though I was a senior executive, it was unbeknownst to me. And that fear that I had of being in a situation where I couldn't provide for my family, it all bubbled up real time. And guess what? I started investing in real estate, but I still didn't have the passive income to cover all my bills. So now I started to realize, man, this strategy, I was on the right path, but I clearly didn't do something the right way. During that same time frame, as I'm doing this, I'm talking to my friends, I'm sharing what I'm doing. I'm trying to get them to do the same thing. Cause I'm like, guys, like, you can save money. Like, I don't even pay rent. I got this 2 unit, this person pays all my bills. This is amazing, right? So we were living below our means, but at that point I had my second kid, and those kids, those daycare.
Yeah, they're expensive.
So I started to realize that, you know what, this isn't just about me. This is about helping other people get into real estate. And once I made that connection that, hey, I can actually help other people and help myself in the same process, that's when it became an opportunity to work with other investors. And we did. We started to do larger deals. We started bringing in those partners and, started to help other people get the same benefits of passive income. And the beautiful thing for me personally was now I wasn't, just regulated to whatever I had in my bank account. I found a great deal. I could put together a team. I could put together a team of investors, and we could go out there and take down that deal together. The other thing that was really empowering is when you're doing it with other people, it's way more empowering, right? Yeah. When I was buying my own little properties, there was something always off to me, and I think about it as if you find something that really helps you in your life, whatever that is, something that helps you, whether it's, a diet, a meal plan, or, a trainer, or again, an investment, whatever it is, if there's something that is really making an impact in your life and allowing you to be a better person or get results, and you're not willing to share that with other people, you almost feel selfish, especially if you know for a fact that these people are going through the same issue. You got a friend who's trying to lose 5 pounds and they keep talking to you about it. And here you are just dropping weight because you got a little trick you figured out, right? Or you read about, and you're not like, of course you would share that, right? Have you tried this? Like you would do that because you care about these people. And it's the same thing with investing. So for me, it was really important to share what I was doing with other people because I want to see them succeed. I want to see them have the same impact. And, that really made it full circle for me. And that allowed us to grow and scale our business. Yeah, no,
I share those sentiments. I feel absolutely the same way. And it's funny because now that I'm doing more with others, and I've always shared it while I was going along the journey. People ask me questions and I'm like, hey, let me help you out, on the side and like help you figure out how to get in. I feel like syndication and doing multifamily and doing some of the deals that I'm doing now, I'm able to help people at a broader, it's like more breadth. And it really had to be like me getting out of my own way of being like, do I want to be out there and all that good stuff? And just like, but if I don't, who doesn't benefit as a result of that, right? And so it's a little bit getting unselfish, and getting a little bit out of your way and just like, people have the opportunity, like, whoa, like even when I stumbled on the space of multifamily, I was like, whoa, somebody else has to know about this. Like, I don't understand like how this has been hidden so long, you know what I mean? And so I definitely, there is so much value when you're doing it within a community. And so I completely echo that in what you're saying.
Can I say something that I think many people would consider controversial?
Go for it.
I have a big problem with the FIRE community. All right. And that's your financial independent, retire early.
Yeah.
And my issue is most of what's taught or what's praised in that community is for you to get off the hamster wheel and retire early.
Yeah.
It's not about helping others unless they want to do exactly the same thing, but it's not about impacting your family. It's not about impacting your community. It's not about impacting other causes. And that's where it feels very limiting and selfish to me because it's like, hey, I just want to get enough where I can stop working as opposed to how can I help those who are closest to me? And that's, I think, the difference in what we're talking about here. And, people think about syndications different ways, but syndications are really just a way to get more people involved in some of these opportunities that you otherwise wouldn't have access to.
Right.
So I talked about kind of fumbling into real estate. Most people are taught that you can, buy rentals, you go get you a house, maybe a small multifamily and rent it out. You can flip properties. You can buy it, fix it up, and then sell it. You could be a real estate agent. And then maybe that you can wholesale.
Yeah.
Very few people know that everyday people like you and I, sometimes who have regular W-2 jobs, are investing in large commercial real estate, apartments, hotels, self-storage. You can actually own these properties and you don't have to be a landlord.
Right.
You can own and get an investor and have the management, have all the perks of owning commercial real estate without the headaches of being a landlord and dealing with the tenants, the residents, all those other issues yourself.
Yeah.
And when we are exposed to this opportunity, I think that opens up the doors to what is possible. And that's something that's really, really important. I think it's great that you've got this show because you're able to share this with other people that they can realize you can be a real estate investor without being a landlord, without being a flipper, without having this passion for real estate.
Yeah.
The truth is very few of us are passionate about real estate.
We just want to make the returns of real estate.
Most of us want to supplement our income. We want to have, an income producing asset that appreciates over time, and we're willing to tolerate certain things to get that, right? We're willing to tolerate being a landlord. We're willing to tolerate dealing with contractors. And some of us actually enjoy that process. But I realized for me, I enjoy working with people. I've always have, right? In real estate, or before real estate, when I was in corporate America, that's what I did. I worked in advertising, but I worked with our creative team. I worked with our strategic team. I worked with our client partners, and I was his liaison. That was my job. I was to get everyone together, help us get on the same plan, and then lead that direction for the organization. And that's what I've always enjoyed doing. And real estate is just a different version of that. So if you can wrap your head around that opportunity to create a new future for yourself and for others, and to do it in a way where you truly can help others as opposed to just focusing on what you get, that can be very powerful. And again, there's nothing wrong with the FIRE movement. In my opinion, though, if you're not out there trying to help other people as well, then it could be very selfish. And I just think it's a great opportunity to help those people closest to you. Yeah.
And I mean, just circling back, I think as you pour, more gets poured onto you. I think it's just a natural principle in the earth. And so, when you get out of your own way, it really is just, I get an opportunity to give other people an opportunity. And I think most people think, like, some people's like, well, what's the shoe? What's, you're giving this because when I help, it's just, it comes back. Like I get to help you grow. Like, don't you want other people to help you grow? It's the same thing. It's a natural, if I give to you, other people will pour into me, and it's just a cycle. It's just a cycle. So it's definitely a beautiful thing to be able to do. And I get so much joy out of watching people financial freedom grow as a result of something they may have heard from me, or seeing them take down their first property because of a tip that I may have given them. So it's definitely, I guess it's a little bit fulfilling because, it is pouring back into me in a certain way, right? It continues to encourage me to continue to do what I'm doing. So yeah, that was good. That was definitely good. I like that you tapped on a little bit of what you did in your corporate world and what you're doing now. How are you able to really parallel and say, hey, so I always tell people, look at what's in your hand. A lot of people are just like, oh, I don't have this. I don't have money. I don't have, like, what's in your hand, and how can you utilize what you have to be able to produce something, whether that's real estate, whether that's income, what's at your fingertips to be able to produce? How are the ways that you saw kind of the environment you came from, the job you had, that you could parallel it and find a space in the real estate market that's like, this could be my thing?
Well, I'm a guy who went to a state school, who had a communications degree, and found a way to make it in corporate America and do really well there. And when I got to real estate, I said, well, I don't really have the construction background. I don't know how much, this flooring should cost in the cost per square foot standpoint, right? So I struggled with that at first. And once I kind of got into it, I realized this is just another business. Yeah. And when you have that background, I oversaw $100 million advertising budget. So I saw, 7 agency partners. I was recognized as one of the best marketers in advertising in the country. I helped the Buick brand become one of the fastest growing brands in America. So when I was able to tap into the things I did have, which were those wins, it allowed me to recognize how I can add value in this space, right? And understanding businesses in the different industries, understanding project management, putting together teams, leadership, that's really what allowed me to thrive and to come in and bring that skill set. It's communication. It's, again, leadership. It's the anticipation of what do we need? What can go wrong? How do we analyze this risk? It's looking at numbers, right? Understanding sales, understanding forecasting. So all those skills are very helpful, and all of us have skills that are transferable. Absolutely. And that's the beautiful thing with real estate. I don't care what your background is. Yeah. You have some skills that are transferable. Maybe you're not the person who's going to be underwriting deals and dealing with the numbers, but maybe you can do some property management work. Maybe you have the investor relations, or you have some marketing background, or sales, or HR, but a lot of those skills are transferable in some capacity to real estate. And I think that's the beautiful thing. For me, again, the project management, the leadership, the marketing, those are skills, and investor relations, since I did a lot of the business liaison work for the agency, all those skills are definitely transferable. So once I kind of wrap my head around that and realize it's okay to not be the expert on everything, especially construction, now I just need to partner and find those people who can be great.
Exactly. Definitely find out what you're gifted, what you're skilled at, how does it parallel, and then how do you surround yourself with gifted people to fill the gaps, right? And finding those right partnerships and teams, mentors, whatever that may be to be able to fill the gap where you're deficient. So definitely. What do you think is skills that have served you along the journey to really being able to thrive in the real estate game?
That's a great question.
And that people should take away, like, here are the skills that have served me, and I feel like it would help serve others.
That's a good question. One skill that I've been able to develop is understanding. And part of that comes from dealing with groups that have opposing views. Mm-hmm. So again, in the advertising world, my creatives, they just want to do something fun that could win them awards, right? They want to do something that was cool and interesting and was going to make the industry buzz. Yeah. Typically, my clients didn't care about that. My clients wanted to move the needle on sales, right? They wanted ideas that were going to sell more widgets. So sitting with our strategy team, we had to find kind of that bridge that allowed us to come up with work that was going to be both impactful while also allowing the creatives to do something that was inspiring. And when it comes to real estate, it's a similar thing. We have investors, we have contractors, we have property managers. All these different people have a different perspective. I'll give you a real one here. Property managers will always want to spend money at a problem. Okay. If there's a problem, they want to spend money, right? Why? Because that's the easiest way to solve that problem for them, right? As an asset manager, as a business owner, as a real estate investor, we always want to save money, right? Sure. So when they say, hey, we've got this issue, they may say, hey, we need to spend more money on marketing. We need to spend more money on this. You may need to look at it and say, let's talk through these other options here real quick. Right. You know, is the issue that we're not getting enough foot traffic? Is the issue this? Is the issue that we're not closing enough? So you've got to be a bit of a detective, right? And that only comes from understanding, and that's from asking questions. So for me, in a lot of ways, I'm not the expert at those different things. I wasn't the expert on creative. I wasn't the expert on the client's business. Even when it was my business, I wasn't the expert on certain things. So that allowed me to ask poignant questions to really understand what was important for the different stakeholders. And then how do we position this so it's successful for everybody? So my contractor, same thing, right? They may give me a quote or a bid, and it's like, okay, I see this bid here. Well, let's break it down. You know, what's really the issue? How do I save money? And by asking that as a question, as opposed to just cutting their budget by 20%, right? You know, now they can actually be creative, and I can let that expert tell me how they're going to save 20%. That's good. As opposed to me just cutting it for them. So once you understand the issue, I can tell them, hey, well, here's what I need solved. Let them go out and solve that. So that's really helped me, and I would say it also empowers your team. Where, you know, anytime you're the leader, like, no one wants to ever hear you say you're the leader. And if you say that, you're probably not really the leader. So part of that is empowering your team. And the best way I always do that is through questions. Hey, how can we get this lower? Can you come back and show me some options to reduce this by 10% or to do this, whatever it is? And then they can come back as the expert and help us understand how to solve those problems.
Yeah. And I think to your point, and a little bit of what you're saying is really understanding everyone has a different vantage point, right? Like, understand, like, I'm seeing the overall project, but, you know, the property manager has this hat on. So he's seeing it from this way. So they may just be focused right now on how do I get this problem solved as fast as possible? Because what's their motivator? What's their driver? What are they compensated by, right? Like, an understanding everyone's hat and how to get everyone on the table driving towards the same goal, and really ensuring that the business plan comes to fruition. I think a lot of you, probably your project management background, there's probably playing on that a little bit, because I kind of have that same way I look at things too. I think understanding, having that emotional intelligence and understanding people and being able to pull out the key information to be able to really drive the project in the right direction. So I like how you define it as understanding it. That's a little bit more, I think, just basic and clear, like where people can understand. But yeah, that's definitely needed, especially because everyone comes with they're bringing something different to the table. They're bringing a different background and life and everything to the table. So it does help to kind of normalize it for people. And I think just putting yourself in people's shoes, like sometimes people can talk above people and not like just sit where they sit because they know it best, right? Like, so helping them to kind of pull the best out of them to be able to get the answers that you need to get. So that's good. That's good. Well, we never end Lessons into Blessings without understanding kind of what are some of the biggest lessons along your journey that have led to your biggest blessings. So across like your past real estate experience, you probably I think you started in maybe early mid 2000s, late 2000s. So over that time period, what has been maybe didn't go as well, but now that you've learned that lesson, it has turned into a blessing that's helped serve you over the time period that you've been doing real estate?
The biggest lesson for me is to really find the right people. It's very easy to get excited about an opportunity and to run and just want to do it, right?
Yeah.
But find the right people, because the right people make everything easier. The right people, they're going to be able to tell you how to save money on a project. They're going to be able to help you navigate challenging situations. And I mean that in every aspect, from attorneys to CPAs to business partners to contractors. Surrounding yourself with the right people will just make your life easier. So we've certainly done projects where we've had the wrong contractors, contractors who've taken money from us, contractors who were ultimately inadequate or not well capitalized enough or didn't have the manpower to complete projects on time and on budget. So by making sure that we bring in the right partners, we alleviate a lot of those questions or concerns. So it's making sure the right people are with you. That really is going to solve 90% of your issues.
Yeah. How do they find those right people? Where would you say, like, get referrals? Because I mean, sometimes you think you're Googling people like, hey, I need a plumber. I need and I feel like it's good to have a bench personally, and not just a bench and contractors, but it just knowing that you have a secondary option in case, right? Especially if you haven't yet vetted a person. But what would you be your what's your strategy? And really, when it's like, hey, I got a need a gap in an accounting space, or I have a gap in a legal space. What's your kind of route in finding kind of the right people to get on board?
So I've been fortunate enough to have a podcast to interview almost 600 guests, and I'm going to steal this answer from one of those guests. I had a young lady named Ashley Wilson on the show, and Ashley and I were talking about that very question, particularly with contractors, but I asked that very question. And the tip she gave, I think, really, really stands out. So one of the best ways to get the right referrals, because we can always get referrals, right? But how do you get the right referrals?
Yeah.
Ask the person who depends on the person in front of them. For instance, if I'm going to get a painter, or let's say a drywaller, okay? I want a referral for someone who can hang drywall. Ask a painter. Because a painter is going to know who hangs good drywall and who sucks at it, right?
Yeah.
They're the one who's got to come in afterwards and clean it up.
Got it.
For electrician, it might be asking, obviously the inspector, if you can get an inspector or that lead contractor. But understanding the trades and kind of the order of where the work is done. Who comes in after, because those people, if you go show up to a job site and, these guys are doing it. Okay, great. It's going to be easy. They did it the right way versus, hey, you know what? They didn't cut this right. So before I can even start, I got to go back and do X, Y, Z. That's a really, really good tip. I would say
that's a very good one.
Like property management, contractors, anything like that. Try to figure out who really relies on that work. That dependency.
Dependent on it. Yeah.
If you can figure that out, that's going to make your life a little bit easier on those referrals.
That's good. That's a good one. I'm going to take that nugget. I like that. Well, John, thanks for joining us on the show. How can people find you? How can they reach out?
Yeah, well, listen, there's two things. One, if you enjoyed this show and want to hear more from great guests and great conversations, we do have our own podcast called Multifamily Insights. The second thing is, if you are looking to invest in real estate, particularly in multifamily, we've put together a sample deal package, and that is available on our website. Whether you want to be active or passive, you just want to wrap your head around some terms, want to get a sense of what should you be looking for, it's a great starting point. So you can check that out at casmoncapital.com/sample deal.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on the show, taking time out. Until next time, stay blessed.
Thank you for having me.